AITA for refusing to take my wife back after she left me for a fun guy? I'm 35 and have been working in cybersecurity for over 10 years. It's not the most thrilling job in the world, I'll admit. I spend my days in front of a computer making sure other people's systems don't get hacked. Nothing glamorous about it. But the pay is excellent. I earn over $100,000 a year, and with 2 kids, that's far more important than any prestigious job title. My ex-wife, Celeste, is also 35. We met in college. Back then, she was the typical party girl. Not a single weekend went by without a party or the grand opening of a new bar. And to be honest, I enjoyed tagging along. We were 21, with no responsibilities, living on instant noodles and odd jobs. It was a simple time. We'd go out Friday and Saturday, recover on Sunday, and head back to class on Monday. Good memories. We got married at 25, and at 27, our first daughter, Arden, was born. 2 years later, Milo arrived, and that's when everything started to change. Not in a bad way at first, just different. I no longer wanted to go out every weekend. I started worrying about bills, diapers, and the future. At first, she seemed to understand. Sometimes she'd complain that we didn't do anything fun anymore, but she'd calm down when I reminded her about the mortgage or Arden's daycare. Then, 2 years ago, everything began to go off the rails. Celeste started hanging out with a group of women from her yoga class, all in their 30s, mostly single or divorced, acting like they were still in their 20s. At first, she only went out on Thursday nights, then Fridays too. Soon came the Saturday brunches that stretched into dinner. Initially, I didn't mind. I thought it was good for her to socialize. Being a mother can be exhausting. The problem started when she insisted I go out with her. Not to spend time as a family, no, but to go clubbing in the middle of the week. She wanted me to hire a babysitter on a Tuesday night, knowing full well I had to be up at 6 a.m. for work. The first time she suggested it, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She got angry. She told me I was getting old, that I had lost my spark. I tried to explain that my priorities had shifted and that watching Arden at her soccer practice or building Legos with Milo made me happy, that for me, a quiet dinner at home was my version of fun. She replied that I was using the kids as an excuse to be lazy. That sentence hurt. From that point on, the arguments became constant. Every weekend brought a new excuse. There's a new spot downtown. Everyone's going. Hendrix has a DJ friend. He got us into a speakeasy. One of my friends is taking her husband to a festival. Why can't you be more fun? And yes, Hendrix. He was the catalyst. A 28-year-old guy, a bartender at a trendy bar, who drove a leased BMW and shared an apartment with 3 roommates. He lived in chaos, but according to Lena, Celeste's friend, he was exciting and knew how to live life. Hendrix started hanging around the group a few months before everything blew up. He always had a story to tell, about some wild party or a spontaneous trip. It was all a facade, a social media persona, all flash and no substance. But Celeste fell for it. She started talking about him every day. Hendrix says you have to live in the moment. Hendrix taught us not to be afraid of being young. Young? We were 35, with 2 kids and a mortgage. Our youth was long behind us. The final break happened last Thanksgiving. Celeste was more irritable than usual, making jabs about our boring life and our lack of spontaneity. On my end, I had just gotten a promotion, principal cybersecurity architect, with a nice raise. While I was thinking about opening a college fund for Arden and renovating the deck, she was dreaming of trips to Las Vegas, just like what Hendrix and his girlfriend were posting on Instagram. The night before the holiday, I was in the kitchen preparing the next day's dinner. My parents were coming over, as were her sister, her husband, and their kids. I was focused, my hands deep in the turkey, when Celeste appeared, dressed to go out. A tight dress, high heels, full makeup. Where are you going dressed like that? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm going out with the girls. Hendrix knows the owner of a new club. We're on the list, she replied without looking at me. Family is coming over tomorrow. Don't worry, I'll be home late, she said, grabbing her purse. You can handle things tomorrow morning, she tossed over her shoulder. I tried to stay calm, but deep down, I felt something break. This wasn't just another night out. It was confirmation that she was already living in a world where there was no room for me or our children. I swear I tried. I told Celeste the kids would be sad if she came home too tired to help with Thanksgiving dinner. I reminded her that my mom was counting on her to help with the side dishes, like every year, and that it was a family holiday, that just this once, she could skip one of her nights out. That's when she said the words that, without her realizing it, ended our marriage, right there in the kitchen next to a bowl of cranberry sauce. God, you've become so boring. She looked at me with a mix of annoyance and contempt. When did you become like this? You used to be fun. Now you're just a middle-aged suburban dad who thinks watching Netflix is an adventure. I'm 35, not 65. I'm not ready to feel dead inside yet. I stood there silently, absorbing every word. She had said suburban dad, as if it were an insult, as if working hard to provide for your family was pathetic, or as if being present for your kids made a man dull. You're right, I replied calmly. I am a suburban dad. I'm 35 with 2 kids. That's who I am. If you wanted something else, maybe you should have thought about that before having 2 children with a guy who works in tech. She rolled her eyes and left. She came home at 4 in the morning, slept through the morning, and showed up to dinner looking like she'd been through a storm. My mother, of course, didn't miss the opportunity to make a few passive-aggressive comments about the store-bought pie, the one Celeste was supposed to have baked herself. 2 weeks later, she broke the news. She wanted a divorce. She said she'd been thinking about it for months, that she still loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore, that she needed to find herself, to have experiences, to discover who she was while she was still young. She must have used the phrase, journey of self-discovery, at least 15 times. I swear, she must have read it on some personal development blog. The most shocking part was that everything was already prepared. She had spoken to a lawyer. The papers were drawn up, and everything was planned. Joint custody, alimony, division of assets, the whole package. And the worst part, everyone knew but me. Her yoga friends, her circle of trust, they were all part of her new beginning, while I still thought we were just going through a rough patch. In reality, Celeste had been planning her exit for months, surrounded by a group of divorcees who were no doubt applauding her for choosing herself. I didn't argue. What was the point? You can't force someone to want to stay. I agreed to mediation instead of a trial. We agreed on a custody schedule. The kids would be with me during the week and with her on weekends. I let Celeste have the house, even though I continued to pay half the mortgage so the kids could maintain their standard of living. My lawyer thought it was reasonable. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near my work, and frankly, it wasn't bad. It was quiet, clean, and, most importantly, finally free of yoga mats scattered everywhere. 2 weeks after I moved out, Celeste had Hendrix move in. 2 weeks. Our children were still asking when Daddy was coming home, while she was already living with a guy so young he could have been mistaken for her kid brother. But of course, I was the boring one. The kids hated him from the start. Arden, at 8, with a clarity many adults lack, asked me why Mommy's friend was always there. Milo, 6, just said that Hendrix smelled weird and refused to eat anything he cooked. Kids notice everything, always. The first month was, let's say, tragicomic. Celeste couldn't stop posting on social media about her new life and living her best self. Photos at clubs, restaurants, concerts, festivals, and of course, Hendrix was in almost every one, with his backward cap and eternal teenage grin. My favorite post? One where she wrote that you should surround yourself with people who reflect your energy, while in the background, you could see Hendrix passed out on a beach chair at 2 in the afternoon. But oddly enough, the kids weren't in any of those photos. Strange, isn't it? Apparently, her best life didn't include her own children. When I picked them up on Sunday evenings, they were exhausted. Arden told me that most of the time, they stayed at their maternal grandmother's because Mommy and Hendrix were tired from going out. Milo said Hendrix spent his days playing video games and demanded quiet because he was hungover. A real father of the year, no doubt. 3 months later, it all started to unravel. That Friday night, Celeste called me in tears. Hendrix had used her credit card for an emergency and maxed it out, buying DJ equipment to launch his music career. The first sign that things were going south came when Celeste called me one afternoon, her voice a mix of nervous and ashamed, to ask if I could cover her share of the mortgage, just for this month. I was silent for a few seconds, trying to process what I had just heard. It was surreal to hear her ask me for financial help when, Just a few months earlier, she had left everything for this fun life with Hendrix. I answered calmly, without raising my voice, though each word felt like it weighed a ton. That sounds like a Hendrix problem, not mine. She said nothing. I only heard her shaky breath before the line went dead. I don't know how she made that payment. Maybe, as she often did, she asked her parents for help. But the truth is, that was only the beginning of a long series of mistakes that would lead her to a place she couldn't escape from. The 4th month after the divorce marked a turning point. Hendrix got into an accident with Celeste's car. No alcohol, no substances, just irresponsibility. He had decided to answer texts while driving. The insurance, of course, covered nothing, since he wasn't even listed on the policy. That same night, Celeste called me again. I don't know what to do, she sobbed. I need money for the deductible, otherwise I can't get to work. I sighed. It wasn't cruelty, just exhaustion. Ask Hendrix. He's so spontaneous, so free. I'm sure he'll figure something out. She hung up without a word. But I knew she would find a way, because Celeste had always known how to get herself bailed out. But what came next was much worse. In the 5th month, the story took on the air of a tragicomedy. One afternoon, a girl of about 23 showed up at the house, screaming that Hendrix owed her 3 months' rent and had stolen her PlayStation. Celeste had to call the police. That night, my daughter Arden called me, crying. She said there were mean people yelling outside the house. That's the kind of anguish no father should ever have to hear. My voice trembled as I tried to reassure her. The next morning, I filed for an emergency custody order. I couldn't let my children live in the middle of that chaos. The 6th month was the breaking point. Celeste, who worked in marketing and had a good position, started showing up late or hungover to her meetings. Her performance plummeted, and the company put her on a performance improvement plan. She called me, desperate. I can't lose my job. I need you to take the kids for a few days so I can get myself together. I thought I was too boring to understand your new lifestyle. I replied in a calm tone that I struggled to maintain. And I guess now you'll have to figure this out on your own. Despite everything, I agreed to take the kids. Not for her, but for them. They needed stability, routine, someone who didn't disappear after a night of partying. Meanwhile, Hendrix was on his own spiritual quest. He had quit his serving job because, according to him, it no longer nourished his soul. He decided to launch a podcast about living in the moment and connecting with your inner universe. He had 12 subscribers, one of whom was his mother. He was spending Celeste's money on microphones, courses, mentors, and all sorts of nonsense that was supposed to turn him into a consciousness creator. He was, in short, a parasite dressed up as a Zen guru. By the 7th month, my kids started openly asking to stay with me full-time. Arden told me she didn't want to go to her mom's anymore because Hendrix was weird and lazy. Milo confided that Hendrix ate all the good snacks and made mommy cry a lot. Hearing that broke my heart. No matter what she had done to me, Celeste was still the mother of my children, and it was painful to imagine the image they were forming of her. The 8th month, everything fell apart. On a Tuesday night around midnight, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, it was Celeste. She was unrecognizable, deep dark circles under her eyes, hair a mess, wearing shapeless clothes. The woman I had married 10 years ago was gone. I made a mistake, she whispered, unable to look at me. I let her in. I made some coffee, and as the aroma filled the room, she started talking between sobs. She told me Hendrix had been cheating on her with a 22-year-old girl, a waitress at the bar where he used to work. The affair had been going on for months, and Celeste found out because the girl had posted pictures on social media, taken in her house. In her bed, the same bed Celeste and I had bought for our 5th wedding anniversary. But that wasn't even the worst part. Hendrix had been stealing money from her purse, jewelry from the bedroom, and had even opened credit cards in her name. She was drowning in debt, her credit was destroyed, and the house was about to be foreclosed on. The reason? Hendrix had convinced her to stop making mortgage payments so they could go on vacation to Cabo. During the trip, while she was passed out drunk, he had slept with 2 other women. I don't know what to do, she sobbed. I need help. And yes, a part of me felt pity. No one deserves to be used like that. But I also knew she had chosen this path. She had traded stability for excitement, commitment for adventure, and that adventure was now eating her alive. Talk to your lawyer, I finally said, the one you hired to divorce me. Maybe he can help. I can't afford him, she whispered. I can't afford anything anymore. I'm going to lose the house. That's a shame, I replied simply. She looked at me, waiting for me to do what I had always done. Help her, fix things, save her from her own mistakes. But that time was over. I was no longer her savior or her solution. The kids can stay with me until you get back on your feet, I added. She started crying again, but agreed. She had no other choice. Shortly after, Hendrix disappeared. He blocked Celeste on all social media and moved in with the waitress. In his new version of the story, Celeste was the crazy ex who was harassing him. Meanwhile, she moved back in with her parents. Her father, who had always found me boring, finally told her she was a fool for leaving me. Her mother just kept repeating that she should have thought of the children first. A year had passed since the divorce. In the settlement, Celeste had kept the house, but 6 months later, she lost it. I bought it back from the bank for much less than it was worth. A small gesture, perhaps a little petty, but also a good investment. The kids were overjoyed to have their old rooms back, and for me, that was all that mattered. Today, Celeste sees the children every other weekend, when her job allows. She's working 2 jobs to pay off the debts Hendrix left in her name. She lives in a small apartment in a neighborhood she never would have considered living in before. Gone are the yoga classes, the girls' nights out, the Sunday brunches. All that's left is work, sleep, and routine, the simple life she once despised. Sometimes, she sends me messages late at night, during those hours when the silence must become unbearable. Sometimes I read them, but not always. Some wounds never heal, while others just stop hurting over time. Celeste often writes that she misses our family, that she's nostalgic for the quiet life we shared, that she now understands the value of the stability she used to call boring. She says she threw it all away for something that, in the end, wasn't even real. She admits that Hendrix used her and that she didn't see it, blinded by the feeling of being young and desired again. But I don't reply to those messages anymore. There's nothing left to say. The kids are doing well. Arden is continuing her therapy, learning to live with the scars of abandonment. Milo has started soccer, and, to my surprise, he's quite good. He hardly ever asks about Hendrix anymore. Sometimes, they just want to know why their mom always seems sad. I tell them that sometimes, adults make decisions that don't turn out as planned. It's the kindest version I can offer them. Celeste's yoga friends vanished into thin air. Surprising, isn't it? When she was throwing parties and buying rounds, everyone talked about sisterhood and positive energy. But when the money dried up, no one texted her anymore. Lena, the one who introduced her to Hendrix, even said that Celeste was bringing down the vibe with her negativity. The irony is painful, truly. My parents, who were devastated by the divorce, have decided to cut her out of their lives. My mother simply calls her that woman, and my father just shakes his head in silence whenever her name is mentioned. Celeste's parents, on the other hand, call me more often than they call their own daughter. Sometimes they pick up the kids from school. Her mother always gives me an extra tight hug, telling me I'm a good father. I know it's her way of apologizing for what her daughter did. And to be honest, despite everything, I've never been better. The promotion I got just before Celeste left opened new doors for me. 6 months later, I was making almost double what I was earning back then. I still live in our old house, a spacious 4-bedroom, but everything has a different meaning now. I have peace, real peace. No one calls me boring because I want to stay home on a Friday night. No one faults me for being responsible. No one spends money we don't have to impress strangers. For the past few months, I've been seeing someone. Her name is Delilah. I met her at a work conference. She's 37, has a son, and has been divorced for 3 years. Her ex left her for his secretary. So, she understands my story completely. We're not in a rush. We're taking things slow. We do family activities. We talk about what really matters. For her, spending an afternoon at a hardware store is a great plan for a Saturday. She gets excited when she finds good deals at the supermarket. She falls asleep at 9:30 p.m., watching Netflix without any guilt. It might sound mundane, but to me, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Celeste found out about Delilah when she came to pick up the kids one weekend and Arden mentioned her name. I still remember her expression, a mix of surprise, jealousy, and suppressed sadness, like a silent slap in the face. She tried to hide it, asking in a light tone who Delilah was, how long we'd been dating, and if it was serious. Arden, with the disarming honesty of a child, replied, "She's super nice, and she never yells at Daddy when she's tired." That night, Celeste called me. It was the first time she had called in months. Until then, she only sent texts. She wanted to know everything: who Delilah was, if the relationship was serious, if she spent a lot of time with the kids. And then, she dropped the bombshell. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try again. For the kids. They need both their parents together." I laughed. Not a cruel laugh, but that incredulous laugh that escapes when you hear something utterly absurd. "Celeste," I said, "you left me because I was boring, because I wasn't fun, because I chose to be a present father over a party animal. None of that has changed. I'm still the same quiet man who goes to bed at 10 p.m., who takes pride in his well-kept yard, and who finds adventure in a new dinner recipe." She was silent for a few seconds, then whispered in a low voice, "That doesn't sound so bad anymore." Of course it doesn't, I thought, because she had learned the hard way that stability isn't boredom, it's a value. That being reliable isn't a lack of appeal, it's a virtue. And that choosing family over entertainment isn't resignation, it's maturity. But to understand that, she had to destroy everything. That's when she started to cry. She said she knew she had made a mistake, that she would do anything to fix it, that this time it would be different. And maybe she was sincere, maybe she really understood, but it was no longer my problem. She had chosen emotion, adventure, and chaos, and she got them. She got Hendrix, with his drama, his debts, and his betrayals. She got the social media life she so desperately wanted. I kept my kids, my peace, and a woman who valued those things from the very beginning. The last time I saw Celeste was a few weeks ago, at Arden's school play. She looked exhausted, aged, worn down by the life she had chosen. Hendrix, unsurprisingly, wasn't there. No one had seen him in over a year. Celeste sat alone at the back of the auditorium, her back straight, but her gaze empty. Meanwhile, Delilah and I sat in the front row with my parents and Milo, waiting for the show to start. The room was buzzing with whispers, laughter, and parents armed with cameras. On stage, among the pastel-colored sets, Arden scanned the audience for someone. When she finally found us, her face lit up, a radiant smile, a wave, that pure pride that only children can express. When the play ended, she ran to us. She hugged Delilah, high-fived her brother, and then turned to her mother. Celeste stood up slowly, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. And I immediately understood that heavy look, the look of someone who realizes too late that they have broken something that can't be fixed. She watched us in silence, as if a truth had finally dawned on her. The boring life she had so despised was, in fact, her only true safe harbor. The stability she mistook for a prison was what gave everything meaning. But it was too late to rediscover it. After the show, while Delilah took the kids for ice cream, Celeste approached me hesitantly. "I really did love our life," she whispered, her eyes wet. "I only realized it when I lost it." "Yes," I replied, not giving her a chance to say more. "It happens." I could tell from her face she wanted to continue. I'm sure she had a whole speech prepared about second chances, about what's best for the children, about forgiveness. But I was no longer the man who would listen to empty promises. I said a calm goodbye and went to join my family. My real family. The one that doesn't run away when life gets monotonous. Over time, I realized the signs had always been there. The discontent disguised as independence, the increasingly frequent nights out, the comparisons to more exciting couples. It was all part of the same pattern, a crisis disguised as a personal quest, but which in reality was just a fear of silence. People think they can escape themselves by changing their surroundings, not understanding that their inner emptiness follows them everywhere. And when it's the person you love, you don't see it. You just feel them fading, pulling away for no reason. You try to compensate, to be better, funnier, more understanding, but you can't compete with an illusion. You can't beat something that only exists in the other person's head. I wasn't enough for Celeste, but I am and always will be enough for Arden, for Milo, and for Delilah. They know that stability isn't boredom, it's peace. This is my story. My wife left me because she thought I was too boring. She chose a life of partying with a man 7 years younger, and she ended up with nothing. Meanwhile, I continued on my path. I raised my children. I built a life with a woman who values tranquility, and I learned to find satisfaction in the simple things. I sleep soundly every night at 9:30 p.m. with no regrets or resentment. The irony is brutal. What Celeste believed was a prison was actually what was keeping her whole. She had to lose everything to understand, but by the time she did, there was no longer a place for her. I was already with someone who appreciated who I had always been, without ever wanting to change me. The lesson is simple. If someone tells you you're boring, let them go, because sometimes their excitement is just chaos disguised as adventure. But the story didn't end there. The worst was yet to come when Celeste tried to come back, wrapped in desperate gestures. 3 months after the school play, Celeste began her silent campaign to regain ground. She didn't dare approach me directly. Her pride still weighed more heavily than her remorse. So, she decided to use the children as intermediaries. She started buying them expensive gifts, things she clearly couldn't afford: tablets, consoles, designer clothes. Arden came back from a weekend with a new iPhone. She's 8 years old. When I asked her what the point was of giving such a phone to a child, Celeste replied that Arden deserved nice things, and that I was too controlling for questioning it. Of course, because protecting your daughter and preventing her from having unrestricted internet access is a crime. I had to play the bad guy. I returned most of the gifts and explained to the kids that their mother loved them, but that sometimes adults make impulsive decisions. Arden understood. Milo just asked if he could keep the PlayStation, and I let him. After the year he'd had, he deserved a little joy. Over time, Celeste started showing up everywhere she knew we would be: a game, a school meeting, even doctor's appointments. Suddenly, she had become the model mother, at least on the surface. She posted photos on social media with captions like, "Nothing is more important than my little ones," all while spending the entire game with her eyes glued to her phone, only looking up when someone took a picture. The other parents saw it. The sympathetic glances were unavoidable. In a small town, stories travel fast. She was the mother who had left her family for a kid and ended up alone. And I was the father who had held it all together with a weary smile. Delilah, as always, handled it with quiet grace. Never a harsh word, never a comparison, never a complaint, just a constant presence. When Celeste made passive-aggressive jabs, Delilah would simply smile and change the subject. Her serenity was my anchor. The real breaking point came 4 months ago. Celeste had been hinting for weeks that she wanted a second chance, using the kids to drop lines like, "Wouldn't it be so nice if we all lived together again?" Arden started asking questions, Milo was confused, and I had to, once again, set boundaries. But I never expected Celeste to show up at my work. Yes, at my workplace, in front of all my colleagues. She walked in, dressed like she was going to a club, with that same old makeup, carrying a Tupperware container I recognized instantly. "I thought you might not have had lunch," she said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Remember how much you loved my chicken parmesan?" The silence was chilling. Everyone pretended to be working, but their eyes said it all. Ainsley from accounting literally leaned forward so she wouldn't miss a thing. Tanner from the network team looked at me with an expression of mixed shock and pity, a look that said everything. What is this circus, man? I gently took her by the arm and led her outside before she could make an even bigger scene. Walking through the parking lot, under the sun reflecting off her car's windshield, I knew with absolute certainty. This woman was no longer part of my life. I told her what she was doing was completely inappropriate, that she couldn't just show up at my job unannounced, that we had set boundaries for a reason. Celeste broke down in tears, right there in the middle of the parking lot, saying she just wanted to prove she could be the wife I needed. "Celeste," I said calmly, "I don't need a wife. I already have a partner. And you are not my wife anymore. That was your choice." She insisted she had made a mistake, but that wasn't true. It wasn't an accident. It was a conscious decision. You hired a lawyer, signed the papers, divided our assets, and moved another man into our home. That wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And choices have consequences. She tried to kiss me, right there, in front of everyone, while Tanner watched from the third-floor window. I pulled away so fast I nearly stumbled. The look on her face, that mix of disbelief and shock, I'll never forget it, as if she couldn't comprehend that I no longer loved her. "It's because of Delilah," she spat out with that tone of sarcasm and jealousy that had always betrayed her. She's not even that pretty. And right there, I saw the real Celeste again. The same one as before, hidden behind the tears and sweet words, superficial, sharp-tongued, convinced that everything revolved around appearances. Delilah is beautiful, I replied. But more importantly, she's stable, kind, and doesn't run away from her family when she gets bored. So yes, in large part, it is because of her, but mostly, it's because of you. After that, the story spread throughout the entire company. The following weeks were a parade of gossip disguised as friendly curiosity, of friendly lunches that were just an excuse to pry. Ainsley even asked me if Celeste and I were trying to reconcile. When I said no, she looked disappointed. Celeste, for her part, changed her strategy. She started telling people I was preventing her from seeing the children, that I was manipulating them to hate her. Some of Celeste's old friends from the yoga group, the ones who hadn't spoken to her in over a year, suddenly reappeared on my social media. They claimed I was a narcissist and was practicing parental alienation. I had to get my lawyer involved and show everything. The custody agreement, the text where Celeste asked me to keep the kids longer, and the emails where she explained she had other plans. When they received a notice of a potential defamation lawsuit, they disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, as if they had never existed. But the damage was already done. At school, some people started looking at me differently. A few mothers stopped inviting Arden over to play, and one father even asked me if it was true that I was keeping Celeste from her kids. I showed him the custody schedule on my phone. He didn't say another word. Delilah wanted to talk to Celeste, but I asked her not to. I knew Celeste was spiraling, and she would only get out of it by hitting rock bottom. And it didn't take long. 2 months ago, she lost her second job. She was working at a department store and was fired for using her employee discount for the same yoga friends who had already abandoned her. She called me in tears, saying she didn't know how she was going to pay rent, asking if I could help her for the sake of the children. Ask Hendrix, I replied, though he's probably busy looking for his next victim. That's cruel, she said between sobs. Cruel was telling your husband he was boring and replacing him with a guy you'd known for 6 months, I retorted. What you're experiencing now are just the consequences. She hung up. An hour later, she sent me a text asking if she could sleep in my garage. Not in the house, in the garage. I didn't reply. The kids started noticing the changes. Arden asked me why her mom's apartment was so small and why there was almost no food. Milo told me she would cry when she thought he couldn't see her. It was heartbreaking to hear, but I couldn't save her anymore. It wasn't my responsibility. Despite this, I started letting her have the kids for longer on weekends. I thought it would be better for everyone. But even that didn't work. Celeste couldn't afford to take them anywhere. So, they spent their days watching movies on her laptop, because she had already sold the television. Over time, the kids started saying they didn't want to go anymore. It's boring, they said. And the irony was painfully obvious. Last month, the final scene played out. Celeste's parents were celebrating their wedding anniversary with a fancy dinner at a private club. On the guest list, Delilah and I were listed together. Celeste was listed alone. It was as awkward as I had anticipated. She was seated at the singles table, surrounded by teenage cousins, while we were at the main table with her parents and the kids. During the dinner, her father gave a speech about the value of commitment and the importance of not running away from problems. Her mother added that she was happy to see her grandchildren growing up surrounded by stable figures. Celeste, visibly drunk, started talking loudly, saying that marriage was an outdated institution and that some people were too cowardly to live their truth. Her Aunt Priscilla told her to sit down and stop embarrassing herself. Celeste tried to make a dramatic exit, but her heel broke, and she limped out of the room under everyone's silent gaze. Arden saw the whole thing and just let out a resigned sigh. That day, I understood that Celeste wasn't just paying for her choices. She was trapped in a cycle she didn't want to escape. She kept seeking excitement instead of peace, chaos instead of stability. While the rest of us were growing up, she remained stuck trying to recapture something that no longer existed. Delilah summed it up better than I ever could. Some people destroy everything good they have, believing that happiness is somewhere else, only to get there and discover that what they were looking for was left behind. Celeste had been an excellent mother before the chaos, before the yoga, before Hendrix. She was devoted, gentle, patient. She threw beautiful birthday parties, knew the names of all the kids' friends, never missed a single school event. That was the woman I had loved, the one who had disappeared without warning. The children still remember that version of her. Arden talks about her animal-shaped pancakes, the story she used to read with different voices. Milo keeps a picture of the two of them on the swings, laughing. These are memories of the mother they once had, who is no longer there. Today, her parents are helping her financially, but I doubt it will last. She's 36, with no savings, ruined credit, a shattered career, and a reputation that's hard to fix. In this town, everyone knows what she did. Opportunities, both professional and romantic, have closed one by one. Sometimes, she writes me long messages, often late at night after she's been drinking. She says she's sorry, that time doesn't matter, that she now understands what she lost. But I don't reply anymore, not out of resentment, but because I finally understood that some battles aren't won by trying to save those who refuse to save themselves. Delilah and I continue to build something solid. The kids adore her son, and life between them is natural, as if we had always been one family. It's not perfect, but it's real, and that's enough. Sometimes, I see her from the window when she comes to pick up the kids. She stops for a moment in front of the yard, looks at the bikes against the wall, the flowers we planted together, the children's handprints in the cement. All of it, this quiet, stable, and sincere life, is what she gave up. And watching her walk away, I finally understood, I was never boring. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.